All right, in 3, 2, 1, we are officially live. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
Gentlemen, quite the week, huh?
Quite the week.
Yeah.
Lot buzzing in the media, that's for sure. But, you know, as we're kind of sitting here collaborating, I know we're talking about wages, right? And not your traditional mainstream media of, you know, what should the minimum wage be, but what's realistic for survival in a community, well, specifically like Madera, the heart of California, slap dab in the middle. We're seeing, you know, home prices on a constant rise, but we're also seeing, you know, wage increases, a lot of opportunities for different types of work. And so today we kind of just want to get to a medium number, right? And see what that looks like, what that breaks down to, and hopefully help you guys kind of figure out or kind of take our idea on how we break down income and assess that with debt, right? Now, we're not financial advisors, of course, but I think anybody who approaches, whether it be a new career or any type of revenue generating or income generating, you know, life change should break down their entire profit loss statement this way, right?
I think it gives them gives folks a perspective of what's really out there, right? Because a lot of times, you know, we can throw numbers out there, but looking into geographical areas, we can kind of narrow down. Rohi and I have talked about maybe an entry level type of position where they're paying you anywhere between $15 to $17. I think we all came in agreement that, well, let's be realistic and give something like a $25 an hour type of scenario and see where that would lead us, especially in today's economy, environment, housing, and cost of living. Rohi?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about constantly on this channel is about how, you know, managing your money and seeing where you're at is hopefully going to keep you out if there is any kind of recession or any kind of financial instability coming up from being in a bad position, you know.
So I think Abel touched on it all. We're not licensed financial advisors, but we are a tool or a resource that you can use based on the experience that we both have, not only in the mortgage industry, but we have a business owner here also that has done pretty well for himself. So I think, if anything, take us as a tool, as a resource that you can use to be able to expand your knowledge in regards to the local economy, at least here in our area. Yeah. And I think it kind of resonates around the nation in ways, you know, because the cost of living is a big issue that's happening around inflation. So like, subscribe, leave your comments, and we hope that after the show you gain some knowledge and utilize this as a resource.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, 6 months after high school, I was working at Sherwin-Williams, and I can remember the conversation through text message, and like I think text was pretty new back then too. But I was talking with my manager at the time, and I'm telling him, if you can get me to $10 an hour. Yeah. I'd be set, you know. And as somebody who had no bills, no responsibilities, you know, that $10 an hour meant everything, you know. So it's just interesting now, you know, when I think of, you know, what are we going to do, $25 an hour, running that full time, 40 hours a week, the anticipation, because 2007 wasn't very long ago, the anticipation is that $25 an hour should afford me a pretty decent life, you know. But we're going to break that down. We're going to get to the numbers right now. So let's kick it off with Jose. Jose, you're going to kind of give us the breakdown on mortgage, you know, living expenses, right?
Correct. And this is how we as mortgage professionals kind of take income, we break it down, and then we're able to compare your debt to income ratio to how much of a home you can afford based on the mortgage, the current rate, and what have you. So again, these figures are only estimates. Based on a $25 an hour full-time employee that works 40 hours a week, we're estimating that that person is going to make about $52,000 a year, right? And $52,000, you would think that would be a pretty good solid income for an entry-level type of position, right? I mean, who gets paid $52,000 nowadays, right? So if you're out there and that's you, then this would help you kind of get an idea of where you're at as far as if you wanted to qualify for a mortgage. So with the $52,000, you divide that by 12 months, and that'll give you approximately $4,333 monthly. And this is gross, by the way. This is before taxes, before any any Uncle Sam's or any other uncles trying to dip into your account,
Yeah.
right? Your 401k, your SDI, your FICA, the Social Security, everything that's out there. This is before that. So that $4,333, we take that and we multiply that. Rule of thumb, it used to be down to, it was 43%, but we're utilizing a 45% debt to income ratio. So assuming that you take the 45% from 4333, that leaves you with a max monthly mortgage payment of $1,950. So that's how we account for the max that you can really qualify. Beyond that, you may be stretching out. As it is, I think you may be stretching out outside of 40% DTI. But again, this is the norm today, trying to accommodate all the folks that want to purchase a home. So $1,950. Now, what does that qualify you for? So I'm going to use another assumption. The assumption is that in today's market, you have somewhere between a 6.7 to a 7% interest rate. For every $100,000 that you finance with that interest rate, it's about $800. So you take the $800 and you divide that into the 1950. What does that give you? That'll give you like a 2.43, or what I like to call $243,000 of mortgage that you can carry with that DTI for that income there. So you may want to rewind that, kind of go see how I came up with that formula. But at the end of the day, the way we figured it, if you're making $25 an hour, you're a full-time employee making $52,000 a year, break that down monthly, it's $4,333, and you use 45% of that gross income, that's $1,950. Once you break into the amount of mortgage that goes into for every $100,000, then you can only pretty much qualify for up to 243, maybe 245 or so. But we're going to use that number. And with that, those are the numbers for someone looking to purchase making $25 an hour.
Right. So, Jose, great, beautiful equation there. Way to break it down. I do want to just clarify for our viewers out there. You multiplied the gross income by 45%. Now, what does that 45% represent? Why do we only use 45%?
Well, the standards in mortgage, in the mortgage industry, is that once you look at your mortgage payment, your household expense, which is typically a lower number, that number in combination to all your other monthly obligations, such as all your credit, your car, everything else, cannot exceed the 1950. This is what the industry or the agencies allow you to say. We think you would be a safe bet, not a big risk in moving beyond 45% of your monthly income. Think about it. If you have $1,000 and $450 go to a mortgage, that means you only have $550 left, not only to get taxed on, but you have to make ends meet with every other utility, bill, car. So 45%, Abel, would be what agencies consider possibly at the peak, if not already pushing beyond a higher risk, possibly in defaulting, because it's already stretching your income. Mm-hmm. So debt to income, you're utilizing your total debt in conjunction to your income, and that's what the 45 represents.
Yeah, now 45%, to Jose's point, it's one of the most standard guidelines for the loans that you're most likely to receive if you're a first-time home buyer. You hear about FHA loans, low down payment, low credit score tolerance, down payment assistance. That 45% is going to be a qualifying standard for that. So that's why we broke it down. So
and
great.
Just to clarify, the standards have always been somewhere between 31% on the housing side. That means 31% of the total income that you make monthly cannot exceed 31%. So again, if it was $1,000, can't exceed $310. But over time, to give folks an opportunity, these with compensating factors, we've allowed for those numbers to jump up a little higher. And like I said, 45% seems to be the norm that I use, because that's kind of where we're at with today's cost of living, with housing, being up high. So income has to meet that amount. And again, the standards were always 31 over 43, just so that you know. But nowadays, I think 45 is something that we utilize in our own calculations. and we see the systems approving that. So therefore, I can say that's the standard.
Awesome. Cool. So we have our living expense. If you wanted to buy a house, I'm sorry, did you say 245 or what was the purchase price?
243 more or less,
Yeah.
and that's the max total debt to income, assuming you have no debt
Right.
whatsoever aside just your income. You have no car payment, no revolving debt. Then your max qualification for that home would be about $242,000.
So we have person A, he's making, or he or she's making $52,000 a year. They just bought a house for $245,000. They have a monthly expense now of $1,950. Mr. Rohi,
Yeah.
what else is there to pay for in life, right? And not just the finer things, but the bare necessities for survival.
Yeah, I mean,
Rohi's
obviously,
going to break it down for us here.
You know, you obviously now you got a home. You got your bare essentials. You got electricity, water. I mean, this house has to be livable.
Right.
So I mean, we kind of went with, even a single person kind of living single light on is probably going to be running at about maybe $200 a month in electricity. Your water bill in Madeira, I think for the most part, would probably be $75 to $100. And that's just keeping the lights on. Now you got your phone bill, you have your internet. If you want to have any kind of internet, I think phone bills, even on the Mint Mobile, I see they're advertising all the time. You're still like $30 a month. And then internet, I know obviously you can apply for some of the less expensive internet, but I think you're still going to be running at about $50 a month. So just right there, your single guy is already spending about $400 on
Utilities.
Yeah. Just to, and that's not, again, you got your garbage and everything that goes into that. So left over with that, when Jose and I were talking about this, the other big expense is staying alive. That means you got to have food.
Right.
And this single person maybe, nowadays who doesn't want to cook or make their own meal, they're going out and having fast food or whatnot. We kind of figured about a $10 per meal, so that's $30 a day. Again, now you're almost about $900 a month in your food expenses. So that actually, sadly, is a bigger portion of your money right there, kind of going just to eating that one hamburger, or whatever you're having for breakfast to keep yourself alive. So, it's not leaving you very much now for kind of anything else to go along the way in the month.
So you did talk about food, but obviously if you're working, you have to transport yourself somewhere. So
Correct.
would you think, and maybe the question, would someone in that level of that $25 an hour, do you think they purchased a car cash, or do you think they're financing it? What's the likelihood of that person? Does he have a car payment?
Well, so since we started off by saying assuming no debt, we'll just assume that grandma left him a car.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they do have fuel expenses because they do have to get to
Correct.
work, right?
Yeah.
So fuel, auto insurance, that's going to be another one that we kind of have to factor in. So outside of the housing expense, Rohi, what's the total monthly payment or debt?
So basically, I mean, like with Jose's numbers, you got about $2,300 to spend after you pay for your home. Okay. Now, obviously, taking into what we talked about for the house, if you take your 9 and everything, you're about $1,400 of that money is what you're spending.
Yeah, so we'll be friendly, right? We'll call it $1,300.
Yeah.
So we got $1,300 plus the $1,950 housing expense, and so $1,300 plus $1,950. Oh shoot,
32.
So we're at $3,200. But here's something that we have to factor in because during Jose's calculation, he was able to use gross income, right? In life, especially when you're a W-2 employee, right? You don't have discretion over your income taxes. It's taken automatically out, right? If you're a single individual, tax breaks aren't as common, and so you could expect a 30% deduction from your wages. That's going to leave you. That's going to take you from $4,333 a month down to $3,033 a month, right? And so in this scenario, we're in the negative. Almost $170.
Yeah.
You're asking for loans now.
Yeah.
Right. So you see, this is where you find you have an individual who $52,000 in hindsight, that's great, right? There's plenty of credit card companies that are going to give this individual, credit, a line of credit, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you're running this tight, and we're not even talking about going to the fair and enjoying a $12 hot dog, or going to the mall and buying some new clothes. I mean, we're just simply talking about surviving. Internet, so that you can work from home maybe, or you can, have a social life, PG&E, all of those things. And so now we start seeing like, wow, this isn't really working out, right? And so we got to cut expenses, elsewhere. So what I wanted to do is kind of take it one more step in this scenario, right? So let's say, okay, well, we found a way, right? So instead of $10 a day for, or what do we say, $30 a day for food, we got it down to 20, and we're able to break even, right? We're able to just live like a minimalist, very, conservatively, and we're able to survive. And we bought our house, right? An individual may assume, or an individual in our area in the Central Valley can assume about $1,000 rent, right? For maybe one bedroom, that's pretty conservative, right? So that would be about $950. So $950 a month of savings from buying a home versus renting, right? And you could probably argue and break it down and say, well, you would also save on utilities, because there's some bargains that would include those utilities, right? But for the sake of simplicity on this calculation, we'll just assume that all of those utility expenses are also required when renting, okay? So we save $950 every single month, right? That's actually a pretty huge savings. And as a mortgage, lender, I am in the real estate, industry. Oftentimes we're trying to promote buying a home, right? We're saying it's always better to buy a home, right? That's how you create generational wealth. But in this situation, that $950 could really make the difference between, top ramen noodles and actually having a little bit of breathing room, right? And actually being able to, maybe have a little bit better of a social life, maybe find a companion, a partner who can contribute to the finances a little bit, right? Because now you could afford a bouquet of flowers, but that's something to consider, right? And so I wanted to get you guys' take on that, because I've heard like Grant Cardone, for instance, he says, rent, don't buy. And every other financial guru is like, what are you talking about? The majority of millionaires did it through real estate, right? Do you guys have a take on that?
Well, I think to your point is that right now, looking at that $25 an hour employee, that scenario that we utilized, it may be a stretch. It may be a stretch. Now, am I saying don't go buy a house? No, I'm just saying it's good to get this exercise in place so you kind of get an idea of what to look for, because once you purchase that home, you may think that payment of $1,950, if that was the case, is going to solve all your issues. But like you said, Rohi, with $1,950, you have added costs. Now, the home may be an existing home that may require patio, concrete, plumbing, roofing, and then so on, all the utilities that go with it. So it's not all inclusive. Now, I wish it was, because then you don't have to worry about the additional costs. If you don't have solar, your energy can be up high. If you're going to include solar, so you have to factor all those things. And this is just a good exercise for any person out there that is into the home ownership process to at least start looking at that. Now, the alternative to that is, okay, I've looked at this exercise and I'm well over my head. What do? I'm still getting $25 an hour, and I still live with mom and pops. Now, could that be a solution? Well, look at it this way. Abel touched on it, generational wealth. If you're out on your own, doing your own thing, and making somebody else wealthy while you're paying that rent, wouldn't it be better to do that to your parents? To help them in that capacity, help them pay down that mortgage? Because at the end of the day, they can't take that with them, right? And typically, you're the heir of that family. If not, maybe a siblings or what have you, if you're in a trust or something. But at the end of the day, I think you get to see how this wealth plays out at the end, because you're part of that team, right? And I'm sure families that are thinking that how do I help my kids? But if you're having to pay out because some of your kids are in different locations and you're having to help each one of them, Is it taking away or is it bringing back in? And sometimes people don't see that, but it's actually taking more resources from the parents and helping out their kids develop. Yes, do you want to do this on your own? Of course you do. But if you have a plan, it's a lot easier to get there than go through the struggles that many people have. I mean, the book's already out there. Take advantage of it. Look at the playbook. And once you look at this exercise, and if you see that you're better off for maybe a year or two, to hold off on that and maybe have a additional income, supplement income, or a significant other that can contribute to that, then it'll be easier for you to enjoy that burger or enjoy that ice cream after. The movies, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part for the stay-at-home kids, because obviously there's a lot of it. I told you guys before. I mean, because of the industry I'm in, we always have to ask for PG&E or something like that, and you always get the stare of like, well, I don't have a PG&E. I live with mom and dad, But it's also the control over the spending to say, okay, you're saving the $1,900 a month or whatever, the $900 if it would have been rent, but you're not putting it in the right spot. They're just spending it.
Right.
You see them now, instead of having that car grandma got them, well, I'm going to go buy me some,
a $950
yeah, exactly.
a month car.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So that's kind of the other part of it is that you can be in the perfect position financially. Mom and dad's not charging your rent. You got this great job. You're making $52,000 a year. But are you really putting it for the future and something that you can grow with? And maybe you're not giving mom and dad the money for rent, but they're putting it away and helping you save for a down payment later on for that home that you're going to get. Or, are you just blowing it and then 10 years down the road, you got really nothing to show for it because you put in a car that's depreciating instead of a home that appreciates.
I'm glad you brought that up, Rohi. So I part of my homework was to break down an assessment on rent versus own, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you were to say, I'm going to be super disciplined, which is a big if, right? And just to Rohi's point that he just made, right? $950 a month over a 5-year term. Because here's another thing, guys. Like, we all want to get rich quick, and we all say, like, where can I put $1,000 today, and next week I'll get $2,000. But the reality is like those day traders. There's a lot of day traders that go broke, right? And they only post their success stories. So it is more of a long-term game, and especially when you're talking about real estate, if you're patient with it, it could be very lucrative. Right, so $950, you're a renter, you have a little bit more breathing room, but even though you have that breathing room, you're super disciplined and you're going to just, store that away. Maybe in a year you're getting, 3% raises or whatever, so it becomes easier and easier, right? But nonetheless, you're saving that. After 5 years, that'd be $57,000 in your savings account, right? That's pretty huge. Now, again, that's assuming you saved it, right? Now, if you go on to the home purchase, the home purchase route, you buy a house for $245,000. Due to the nature of, and these are real-time facts, due to the nature of the industry here in the Central Valley, where supply and demand outweighs supply, it's driving housing prices up, right? So in the next 12 months, it's expected that you can see a 10% appreciation on your home's equity. Okay, so if you bought a house for $245,000 today, in a year you could expect that house to be worth $269,000. Now, a 40-year average is our 40-year average in California is appreciation right around 6 to 8%. Right, it's always been pretty good, but I'm going to use 4 for conservative purposes. Right. So let's assume year 2, 3, 4, and 5 appreciated at only 4% after this year of 10%. That would leave your home value at $314,000, leaving you a grand total of almost $70,000 in equity. And that is an asset into your home, right? Now, $69,000 versus $57,000, you were pinched to get there, but again, just like saving that money became easier because maybe you added income, you got promoted, whatever the case may be, so does that living expense. But the difference is when you have that mortgage and it becomes part of the routine, everything else kind of falls into place, right? It forces you to have that savings. Now, that renter, I can guarantee you with that $57,000, if they were to have that, they're going to be eager to buy a home, right? they're going to be really eager to take that 57 cent. I have a down payment now, right? And what are they going to do? They're going to buy a home that is now going to cost them $69,000 more than it would have if they would have bought it 5 years ago, right? Because they're on the opposite end of appreciation. They're dumping all of that money, or the majority of that money, into a home equity anyway, right? Because some people might say, oh, well, at least that $57,000 is liquid. Well, the chances are you're probably going to have to invest it eventually. You're going to have to use it, right? You're going to acquire that property. It's going to cost you $69,000 more. And then you're going to have that equity built into your home. But you could have started that a whole long time ago, right? Now, I know we're all homeowners. I know we're all family individuals. So I also want to talk about the quality of home ownership versus renting, right? You know, and I want to hear about your guys' experiences with, you know, raising a family in a home that you own versus what it might be like if you didn't, right?
Sure.
Well, I can start off because I've had both experiences with the family, right? After the 2007, 2008 crisis, obviously, you know, put myself in a situation where, unfortunately, I lost my home. So that meant that I couldn't buy because you get penalized, right? You have to wait a certain period until you're eligible for financing with FHA as you would for a conventional. Each one of them has their own period of time. One may be 3 years after a foreclosure, the other one may be 7, depending on the extenuating circumstances that you had. In this case, I think I was one of millions of Americans that went through the same process. And being in the industry, you would think, freshly out of into the industry, you would think that I would pick up on something. But again, it was the consumer in me, the ambition in me in trying to grow that equity, that let me get up there, let me jump on that. And certainly enough, I mean, I found myself outside of my means, and it put me in a place where I could no longer afford that mortgage payment. And that gave me a humbling experience, believe it or not, because then after that, I told myself, well, I'll never do that again, at least not for now, because I couldn't. And two, I had to settle for rent. While I was renting, I remember my rent was probably about $1,050 to $1,095. But the one thing about renting that I did appreciate is that I didn't have to add anything to the home. I didn't have to worry about the landscaping. I didn't have to worry about adding additional features to the home. It just supplied me with shelter, supplied me for a comfort that I knew that, hey, I was inside home with my family, and then I was able to ramp up and start saving money, right? I wanted to buy a home because I essentially, you know, that having kids really put me in a place where, man, I want to give my kids something to play with, a backyard. I had a good, nice backyard, great neighbors, good neighborhood, by the way. But, you know, it dawned on me that something was pushing me to say, you got to go get your own home. You got to get your own home. And after about 5 years, did I decide then to jump into the market again. This is after the market had tanked. Somewhere in 2012 was at the trough, and then it started slowly rising. So somewhere in 2014, I decided to go back into the game. I did purchase my home. I thought I got there's a lot of equity, but I will tell you this, that I've added a lot of money to try to bring that house up to standards. Because again, when you buy an existing home, if it's older than 20 some years, then it has deferred maintenance. Yeah, everybody will maintain their home, but the roof will go out. You know, you'll start getting mold in certain areas. Your plumbing may be going out, or there's new things that you have to add. Solar's being added. So you start really adding and compiling all these expenses that go into it. And sometimes you think, well, shit, I'm just probably breaking even now with the equity that I have in that home. Of course, it's something, home ownership is going to give you an asset. This is the biggest asset that we all chase. But the quality of life that you have to attain yourself to try to maintain that, right? Because now you have a mortgage that you can't, same thing with rent. So if the rents are very similar to what a mortgage payment would be, then that'd be a no-brainer. But if your rents are this much lower than this expected mortgage payment, then that's a decision to make. It is something to think about and see if, in fact, that is something that's going to make my quality of life better. Because in trying to attain that mortgage payment, I may stress myself out. I may have to just push myself a little bit more than what I have to, and the quality of life may not be there. Now, I'm not saying that's the case in many, but that's my experience is that I probably jumped back into the market in a good time because compared to prices today, I think I bought in a pretty good fair price that I can say, you know what, it kept me comfortable to where my mortgage payment isn't as much as what I see today, right? Again, that being because interest rates are high, prices are high, and median incomes are probably somewhere down here. So it's hard to say. My experience, I can tell you that it worked out for me at that time, and not sure what you see there, Rohi, but that's my experience thus far.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it, I guess, I mean, the advantages, like you said, is that obviously having a home that you own, if you're the kind of person that you can do what you want. If you want to redo the backyard, you can do that. You want to, change the way the layout of the house is. You need to knock a wall down. You want to add a wall, you can do that. We're in a rental. It's just a space, But I can tell you, having a rental, something that you don't think of as like utilities falling apart, like the air conditioning going out. I had our rental AC went out this year, and it's to them. It doesn't cost them anything, right? They just call me up and they say, hey, AC's out. And I'm the one that's got to go like, okay, did I collect enough rent over the year and save enough to make sure, if I got to go buy a unit that's, $4,000 to $8,000, that money is there. The one thing, though, that I guess we didn't really talk about a little bit with some of the rental is that a mortgage is fixed. I mean, that is the one thing that unless you're on a variable interest, for the most part, if it's $1,900 a month, it's $1,900 a month for the next 30 years, where your rent over the next 30 years will probably go up. I think every person that has a rental increases that rent a small amount, but it's going to be continually increasing to kind of keep up with it gets expenses and stuff. So that is something that looking at those two people and saying long term, I know my amount for the next 30 years I'm going to be paying each month, whereas a renter, next month it may go up another $100. And I think that's when you say like the family aspect, that's where I wouldn't like renting because, I may be living off of this, $1,000 a month rent, and the next month here comes the homeowner and says, okay, you know what, it's $1,200 a month now.
Right.
And I go, well, that extra $200 is enough to break us. Now we have to move. And I think you see some of that with some families where it's like it's constantly there's no stability. It's like every 6 months or a year they're moving to a new place. And I think as raising children, that's something that I wouldn't like to do to my family. I like the idea of this is where we're going to be unless there's some major catastrophe. We're gonna be here. This is gonna be our home. For the next 20, 30 years. So
yeah, that's a good point. The instability of the rental market and. When we talk about appreciation, homes becoming more expensive, right? And the more expensive they are, the higher those monthly mortgages are, right? The higher those monthly mortgages are, the more landlords have to cover, right? And so even, not all landlords are paying for these properties cash money, right? So it's not all 100% profit. They have a mortgage to cover. To Rohi's point, there has to be a amount of reserve to cover. For maintenance, and so all of those things you'll be paying for as a renter, and they could fluctuate. And so some people, you hear stories all the time. Hey, I've been here 4 or 5 years. My rent has always been this much. Well, now the kid's taking over, managing that property, and the kid wants fair market value. Well, hey. Glad you had a great relationship with dad, but I need to make some money, right? And they have that right because that's their property, right? And that's what real estate is. It's not. That's a whole other conversation, but it's not. Real estate isn't government regulated to per se to where we can say they're going to tell you how much you can sell your house for and things like that, right? There are some restrictions. We can get into that another day, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So for me to answer kind of that question as we circle around, I bought my first house in 2009. I was just a kid at the time. I had a kid on the way, and that's what propelled that. And all I wanted at that time was I wanted to have a place for my family. My fiance at the time, my kid, I wanted a place for him to arrive to. I knew that I wanted to be in that environment, right? So whether I rented or bought, really didn't care. And it was actually my in-laws that were like saying, well, you should buy then. You need to buy a home. The economy just crashed. You can get a home for super cheap. And we did, right? And we had that house between 2009 and 2016. And in 2016, when we sold, we had made $120,000 in profit off of that. After everything was paid, realtor fees, all that stuff, right? Walked away with 120 grand. And I was thinking, wow, between 2009 and 2016, I did not save up $120,000 on my own, because you learn to spend everything that you make. And it was gone. And had I not have that investment, that little nest egg of equity just kind of building as I'm just going through life normally, then the opportunity to move into a larger house that fit our family's needs in a neighborhood that we knew that we wanted to be in, with next to the schools that we wanted our children to attend, that wouldn't have been possible, right? So in this scenario, we said, hey, you make $52,000 a year, $25 an hour. This is what you could afford, but that was maxing out. By no means do you have to max out on what you qualify for, right? Just because you qualify for 245 doesn't mean that you have to max out and buy that. However, full disclosure, if you look online, there's probably not too many options, under 245,000 right now in Madera. So you're probably going to have to really, humble yourself to a sense where it's not going to be your dream home. Just because you're buying a home doesn't mean it has to be the glitz and glamour all at one time. Think of it as a true investment. Take some baby steps, get what you could afford, what makes sense, roll in your budget and say, great, I have an extra $400 or $500. I'm going to be comfortable. And I would suggest proceeding that way.
And yeah, to your point, I think essentially, kind of like to your experience and mine, and I think that of Rohi's is that you've let the asset appreciate in value to where if in the future they wanted to make a move, they can make a move with the equity that's generated in that home. And again, we're taking a scenario based off of one individual, assuming that you're partnered up or you have a spouse. Obviously, that doubles up the purchasing power, and you have more flexibility to be able to obviously qualify for something more comfortable. Again, if you have a scenario like Abel's just got married and you want to have, or like myself, I think we all wanted the same thing because that's something that we're accustomed to. Is a traditional way of looking at America is that we want that white picket fence. We want to have that home to give our families a sense of security, right? And that's always been the case for many of us because that's something that that's been conditioned for us to believe that this is the way to go. Now, I do want to say full disclosure that we are three different people with three diverse views, but we also want to give our viewers an opportunity that it's not always as easy, and we're not always in agreement to everything. But this is why there's three different folks here with three different views. Although Abel and I may be in the mortgage industry, we may have different views as how we look at the expenses and how we look at appreciation. Obviously, Abel, beautiful example. I gave you something with quality. You certainly gave us something with, at the end of the day, although it may be very, very easy at the beginning, but the increase of those rents may essentially catch up to you to where at the end of the day, you lost out on a good opportunity. But again, you have to look at it from the perspective of the person buying it. What kind of quality of life do I want to have, right? And that's the I think that's what gives the show a really good perspective, is that it's not always bias in that, because we're in the mortgage industry, we're going to push you for that. But if you are looking for a mortgage, feel free to reach out to Abel and make sure that he breaks down for you those numbers so that you can kind of see, because at the end of the day, it is something you have to consider. Do I want to appreciate again? And if so, here's the way you do it. Start off, humble yourself. Start off at a lower, and then essentially build there, because you will get there. You will. And I can tell you, because every one of us here is a living example. We wouldn't be just telling you tales without really seeing the actual facts come across. So yeah, that's what I can say. So thank you again. Appreciate putting this exercise, because it does give a realistic view of what it takes to buy a home in today's day and age.
Sounds good. Well, that pretty much sums it up. Anything else to add?
No.
Subscribe.
Like, subscribe. Tell your uncles, your aunts.
There you go.
Your neighbor. Go knock on their door right now.
There you go.
Well, hey, thank you guys for watching. It's been a pleasure. If you are considering a new career change and $25 an hour is the breakdown, we kind of just let you know what you could afford on your own. If you're married, hey, even better if they work. If not, then reach out, leave some comments, let us know your experiences, and we'd be happy to share those on the next show. Take care.